This podcast is sponsored by nobody.
Hey dudes, this is Miss Misery of Movie Massacre, and you're listening to Tommy Throwback Kovac on Splat from the Past. Tommy will come anywhere.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things could get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming Staci Layne Wilson. Staci wears many hats. She is a filmmaker, a podcaster, a rock journalist. She has a website that she launched called Women in Horror. She does many different things. Most particularly, she made a documentary about her dad's rock band. Her dad was Don Wilson, the founding guitarist of The Ventures, the band who pretty much invented surf rock. And I watched that documentary. It's called Stars on Guitars. It's friggin' awesome. I recommend it highly. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about her love of horror. We're going to talk about, many different things. Her podcast, Rock and Roll Nightmares. It's going to be a great conversation. Pleasant Gaiman just had her on her show recently. And I've kind of seen her here and there on other people's shows. But the fact that she's Don Wilson's daughter, it really got on my radar, so I wanted to reach out to her. I just thought that was so awesome. It's going to be a great conversation today. We have a lot of mutual friends in common in the world of horror. So yeah, here is my interview with Staci Layne Wilson.
Hello.
Hey Staci, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you doing?
I am just spectacular. This is such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
Oh, well, thank you.
My pleasure. So, a lot of people may or may not know out there, but your dad, Don Wilson, was the guitarist and founding member of The Ventures. By the way, my condolences. I had no idea that he had recently passed.
Yeah, we lost him in January, but he did leave behind a great legacy and lived a full life, so that's really the best anyone can hope for, right?
Right. Yeah, he passed 2 days after the anniversary of my car crash, strangely enough.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. And how are you healing? Are you okay?
Aside from type 2 diabetes, I'm healing okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, it takes a while to get over those things.
Yeah. But I thoroughly enjoyed this documentary, Stars on Guitars. I thought it was so straightforward, never boring, very fast-paced. There was no animation reenactments, which was a huge plus for me. What made you want to make a documentary about your father's band?
Well, oddly enough, as you mentioned, my dad is the founder and some guitarist and just the mover and shaker of the Ventures for almost his entire adult life. The band started in 1959 and have a lot of accolades and a lot of people who love them. Over the years, they made 250 albums. I mean, it's all such a great accomplishment, and yet no one had ever made a documentary about the Ventures. And I had already had some filmmaking experience in the narrative world. So my brother, Tim, actually said, "Why don't you take that on?" And I said, "Oh, sure." And then I realized, wow, documentaries are a lot harder to make than a scripted film. But we persevered and got it done.
Yeah, I mean, I was so impressed by how you really dug deep into their backstory and how they influenced so many in music. I mean, they were a band from Tacoma, Washington, who, without even really intending to, they invented the West Coast surf sound by taking the rockabilly aesthetic that was so popular at the time and adding sound effects and making it just a blazing sound of instrumental rock.
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, such a disparate group of people that they've influenced, from John Fogerty to Jimmy Page to Marky Ramone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wild. And it's really just, I learned a lot making the movie, actually, because, of course, my dad, just being my dad, kind of took it all for granted. But I learned a lot throughout the course of making the documentary and gained a different kind of respect.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching those Warner Time Life infomercials that advertised 50s rock and roll, and
Right.
I'd hear "Walk Don't Run," and it was always such a catchy tune that was always just so memorable in those commercials. I mean, Duane Eddy started the rock instrumental kinda, just before them, and he was doing essentially what they did, but he had saxophones in the music, and it just didn't have that kind of sound. Then there were people who were trying to do what Duane Eddy was doing, like the Lively Ones and the Tornadoes, and even the Ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they all, at that time, it was the cusp of a lot of innovation in music. And one of the things that is brought up in the documentary was how, you're right, the Ventures, they didn't have saxophones or other kinds of instruments kind of in the way, as John Fogerty said, budding guitarist at the time. Aspiring musicians could really hear that clean guitar sound on their records, and that's what drew a lot of wannabe or aspiring guitar players to the Ventures music.
Yeah, it's funny. A couple of years ago, I talked to Dean Torrance of Jen and Dean, and he was in a surf rock band in high school with Sandy Nelson. And Sandy told the guys, drum solos are the future of rock music, and someday there will be a number one hit of a drum instrumental on the charts. 2 years later, Sandy Nelson's Teen Beat hits number one. Isn't that amazing?
It is. And yeah, I mean, people were so visionary and really confident then. It was just such a great time to unleash the rock guitar sound.
Oh yeah, they laughed in his face and told him he was crazy.
Right, and yeah, of course, drum solos now have sort of become the thing of a joke with the long drum solo, like in a Gata de Vida or a John Bonham, in the middle of a Led Zeppelin concert going on for 30 minutes on his drums. But I just love to learn about how musicians became inspired, especially in the early days, and how nurturing and fostering they were of one another. I mean, of course, there's always band rivalries and things, but it was just such a time of love of music then.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had some great people in there do interviews. John Fogerty, Billy Bob Thornton. Yeah, I didn't even realize, how much they were influenced by the Ventures.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so, but like I said, the clean guitar sound attracted a lot of listeners, and then they would put their own touch on it or their own flourishes and do a different genre of music. But yes, the documentary does go into how they even influenced heavy metal guitarist Scott Ian of Anthrax. Unfortunately, he was on tour most of the time I was filming, but he wanted to be in the documentary to talk about, how much my dad, Don Wilson's rhythm guitar really influenced Anthrax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you got Pleasant interviewed in there, and she summed them up perfectly when she said that they were hoodlummy.
I love that description. Yeah, she's very visual, isn't she? She's great.
Yeah, I mean, Pleasant can lead you down so many rabbit holes that you never expected to go, and there's no stopping her.
Yeah, when she was on my podcast, which is called Rock and Roll Nightmares, she was talking about
Yep.
a seance that she did with Belinda Carlisle of the Go-Go's in the early days when they were roommates and they lived in this haunted house. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I never expected the conversation to go there, but yeah, she's great.
Oh, yes.
Podcast too, The Devil's Music, which is awesome.
Yep, I listen to it every time she has a new episode, and I did listen to your interview with hers as well.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I love how she mentioned the Go-Go Surfing and Spying was influenced by them. I didn't even know that. That was so cool.
Yeah, it really is cool. Yeah, there's a lot of interrelationship with the musicians and the Ventures. So yeah, like I said, they influenced a lot of people that you would never expect were influenced. But then when they talk about it, you can see how the parallel lines are drawn and the dots all connect.
Yeah. Did you try getting anybody else to do an interview, but they turned it down because of scheduling?
Oh, yeah, there were quite a few. I mean, that's one of the difficult things about making a documentary. Maybe that's why some of them take 10 years to get done. I mean, I've heard filmmakers talking about very long haul projects, which is really not my style. I like to get things done quickly. So ours took 3 years, but, you know, even after the fact, you know, people would see the documentary, musicians, and, oh man, I wish I could have been in that. You know, like Joe Bonamassa is a huge Ventures fan, and I was just talking to a mutual friend of his and mine the other day. And he said, oh man, Joe would have loved to have been in that, and he's a huge, huge Ventures fan. And I had reached out to his people, but never heard back. And you know, you can only ask so many times, but I'm sure they probably never even came to Joe with that request at all. Sometimes those managers are gatekeepers to the nth degree, and you know, so things like that happen, but I really am super happy with all the people that I did assemble.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing that tugged at my heartstrings was your grandma, Josie Wilson, ran the Ventures fan club, and I love that because it's such a bygone era now where people had fan clubs, you know, and it's sad how, back in those days, the fan club presidents, you know, they got to know the person that they were doing the fan club for, you know, and then nowadays celebrities don't even trust fans. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, it has changed quite a bit in our world of not only just how it's progressed, but social media too. And of course, again, the artists do have a direct link to their fan base if they run their own Instagrams or whatever it may be, but it's a different, I guess it's just the age of instant gratification, and nothing seems that special anymore, because back then when my grandma was doing the newsletter, you know, the fans would anxiously await for the news that came out every 2 or 3 months. And it's a different feeling.
It is. So has the documentary been well received?
Yeah, it sure has. Yeah,
Good.
It's really, really bowled over by some of the nice letters that I've gotten from fans who've watched the documentary and said that they enjoyed it and they learned something, which is important to me, to not only entertain but to be educational. And so I feel like I've achieved that. And although it's been out streaming for a while, it did have a big IMAX premiere a couple months ago in Gig Harbor, which is right next to Tacoma, and we had a full house, and I won Best Director at the festival, so that was exciting.
Nice. So going back in time, what age did your interest in horror begin?
Well, when I was a little kid, my mom actually scarred me for life by taking me to the drive-in to see The Exorcist. I was like 6 years old, and then she would tease me with the Reagan voice, the demon voice, when I was a little kid. So, but instead of running from it, I kind of embraced it. And actually, my dad was a big fan of the Universal monsters and Vincent Price. And I remember when I was about 11 or 12, he had let me stay up late to watch The Pit and the Pendulum.
Oh yeah.
And so it was directed by Roger Corman.
Right.
I actually have met and interviewed several times now after becoming an entertainment reporter.
You're so lucky.
In the horror genre. So I've always loved it. All of its iterations, all the different. That's what the horror, the genre is. You can have comedy, you can have supernatural, you can have slashers, you can have true crime horror. So there's really a lot to explore in it, and that's why I've always loved it.
Absolutely. So that was the first one you saw. So what are your favorite horror films?
Well, I have to go with the golden age of filmmaking, which to me is the 1970s. So I do love movies like The Exorcist and The Omen, and The Shining, of course, is 1980, but I feel like it's kind of 70s-ish. So those movies that are very visual and cerebral and made by auteurs.
Yeah. Did you grew up during that 70s wave of horror and sci-fi on local UHF cable stations?
Sure, yeah. absolutely. And then going back to the 60s, of course, stuff by Mario Bava, which is also, just really artistic and beautiful. The colors, the Technicolor, that was just of its time is really fun. But I have also seen some really great horror movies over the years. I run womeninhorror.com, so I see a lot of horror movies to this day. And I thought the Hellraiser reboot was pretty good, and I enjoyed the Predator reboot, Prey, which was good. So, yeah, it's still a very strong genre.
Right. Yeah, they would show like the Ray Harryhausen movies, public domain stuff like Carnival of Souls and Night of the Living Dead. You guys in LA had Sinister Seymour host horror, right? Before Elvira.
Elvira, yes, Mistress of the Dark.
Yeah, I love the original 1980 Friday the 13th. And
Me too.
The Evil Dead, Dracula 1931, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. I love the Charlie Band Empire movies like Crawl Space and The Alchemist, Troll, Tourist Trap, all the early Roger Corman stuff. Yeah, I have very eclectic taste in horror.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot to explore, and even when you feel like you've seen everything, some hidden gem will pop up in a friend's Facebook feed or something, and oh man, I haven't seen that. And one thing to be said about the instant gratification and immediacy of today's technology is that you can go and find that movie you just never saw.
That's one thing I love about it. Yeah, I've discovered a lot of gems the last few years that I've discovered. I've watched on YouTube, and I've interviewed people from. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Did you go to horror cons in the early years of horror cons?
I did. I was working as an entertainment reporter freelancer, but I worked for horror.com, which is no more, and sci-fi.com. So, yes, I was dispatched to a lot of horror conventions and, of course, Comic-Con, which was the killer on the feed after 4 days, running around with my microphone and my cameraman. But so I've been to a lot of conventions, and now I've kind of had my fill of them, so I don't really go to them on my own time. But I did go to Las Vegas's amazing Comic-Con a few weeks back, and that was fun.
I started going to them in 2016. When I was a kid, my parents don't like horror, so they never took me to Fangoria when we had it in San Jose and stuff. So I started going late, following my car crash, and I love them, but I become such a critic of them at the same time. I just don't like the amount of autograph prices that they charge now.
That's insane. Yeah. Where are you located?
Currently, I'm in Redding, California, but I go all over California for cons.
So, yeah, Monsterpalooza is one of my favorite ones. That's always good. Son of Monsterpalooza, smaller one in Burbank.
That's my favorite. Yeah, that's the first one I went to was Monsterpalooza, and I was going every year until the pandemic happened.
Yeah. Yeah, they just had another one. I missed it, though. But you can always see some really cool people there, even if they are charging an arm and a leg for an autograph. But yeah, you can see some really neat horror icons, not to mention the artistry of it, because Monsterpalooza does concentrate more on the visual effects and the art.
Oh yeah, still, I've met so many great people at them over the years. I remember my first one alone. They had Catherine Mary Stewart, Kelly Maroney, Robert Hayes, David Naughton, Brink Stevens, Kathleen Kinmont, Fred Williamson, all in the same day, I remember.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I've been having conversations with people about this thing. This era of conventions with all the money they charge for autographs, this is payback for not getting residuals on these horror movies back in the 70s and 80s.
There you go. It all evens out somehow, right?
Exactly, because that's all I've heard from so many people. So many people tell us, we weren't aware that this movie was a cult success, because they didn't get residuals and they were too busy working, so they didn't really take it in. Yeah. It's really crazy. We just lost Ted White on Friday, who was Jason in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. I
Oh,
I interviewed him in 2019, and funny thing about that movie, Lisa Freeman, who was the nurse that gets killed at the beginning, her father, Leonard Freeman, produced Hawaii Five-O.
wow. Well, a small world.
Exactly, exactly. That's why I had to bring that up. I thought that was so funny.
Right, yeah. I mean, the Ventures really expanded on that Mort Stevens song because the song that the original composer had written was only a few seconds for the opening of the Hawaii Five-O, and then the Ventures put more guitar into it and it expanded on that song. And actually, they kind of brought the show from the brink of cancellation because of the song became such a big hit on the radio.
Huh, interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So, sounds like you tend to gravitate towards the supernatural genre. Are you into slashers that much at all?
Sure, I am. I like the older ones. The 80s ones are
Right.
fun. But yeah, I do. I prefer the supernatural. Although I'm just, before you called, I was going through edits on my next book, which is called Rhapsody in Red, and it's kind of a horror movie on the printed page, and there is a slasher in there with a hook hand. So
Awesome.
I do dive into the pools of gore sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that more than anything. And I've met more and more people who don't like slasher films that much. They gravitate towards supernatural or something, and they call it torture porn.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, torture porn, that's not my thing, but I certainly was covering a lot of it as an entertainment reporter. And that's the thing is you get a really good education, whether you want it or not. So I think it really informs you as, either a critic or a reviewer to have seen all the different genres. So you can come from a basis of wide knowledge.
Yeah, I've certainly gotten an education as well doing this podcast.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I made stuff I didn't even realize before for years about certain things. It's pretty profound. Yeah, I see. I know you were a journalist, as you mentioned, but what made you want to go into filmmaking?
I kind of fell into it. I did make my first short film. I'm trying to think. It was 2010 or 2011 maybe, and it's a triptych. It's kind of a dark fantasy based on Edgar Allan Poe's Annabelle Lee poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met Ogre from Skinny Puppy through being a film journalist when I interviewed him for Repo the Genetic Opera.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought with the visual that he would make a great Edgar Allan Poe. So we worked together on that. And then, I thought it would be a one-off. But then some people saw the triptych of shorts, and I was kind of encouraged to make a couple more, and I did. I made a couple other shorts. And then I got hired by Jennifer Blanc-Bean, who's married to Michael Bean, to write and direct my first feature film, which is called Cabaret of the Dead, a.k.a. Fetish Factory. So that was a lot of fun. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. You know how it is, one thing kind of leads to another. But my true love really is writing books. So that's what I'm concentrating on mostly these days.
Oh, that's so cool. I envy anyone who gets to make films. I can't get anyone like-minded in the business to read my screenplays, much less make a movie.
It's tough, man. Everyone has a script, it seems. And I guess people feel like they're bombarded with them. But, there are ways to get it out there. And sounds like you probably have some good ideas since you've delved into the genre so much yourself, and you know all these actors from the classics. So it could still happen. Don't give up hope.
We shall see. I mean, I've been working on this script for 5 years, and then I finally perfected it. I feel, it's definitely the best thing I've ever written, I think. And
I know you don't want to give anything away, but what is it? Is it a slasher, or what's the concept of the script?
it's a supernatural slasher film. It's a throwback to all the movies I grew up watching. It's like Phantasm, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Shining, Charlie Band movies all combined in one, and it really is like a labor of love, I have to say. And you know, this has been I've been stressing this the last 5 years. There's no more horror villains who have personalities and have, you know, cheesy one-liners, you know, when they kill somebody.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
I
it's
came up
time
with
for a revival.
right, I came up with one, you know, and I named him after a guy I don't like that I knew when I was working in the bar business.
That's perfect.
Yeah, and I don't know why they don't have those villains anymore. Why do you think that is?
I think because social media, everyone's a one-liner on Twitter now, so it's not that unique anymore. But, you know, like I said, everything kind of comes back around. Everything comes back in style, whether it's fashion or a film genre. So I would definitely keep trying to get that script read if I were you.
We'll see. I mean, a couple of people have read it, and they were like speechless. You know, like literally
In a
speechless.
good way, I hope.
I have no idea, but they were
Aw.
they were speechless. There's a LGBT message in the script, and I did get some praise on that. Though they told me I handled it very, very well, and it wasn't offensive. So I'm like, good.
Oh, that's good. Well, it's got to be better than They, Them. Remember that movie that just came out a couple months ago with Kevin Bacon?
I haven't. I actually haven't heard of that or seen it. I should look that one up. I didn't know.
You should. Well, it's They/Them. It's kind of a play on the slash. But anyway.
The pronouns.
It's on Hulu. I didn't care for it, but, you know, at least you're kind of on trend with what you're doing, so it could be a good thing.
Yeah, we shall see. My theory as to why they don't have those villains anymore is because there's so much oversaturation of information on the internet of the way the filmmakers handled their success and all the sequels and everything. I think everyone's afraid of being put in a category or a box as a filmmaker. So they're just going a different way, and they're making movies in hopes that's going to be the only one of that movie. You know.
Yeah, that almost never happens. It seems like there's a lot of sequelitis going on. So whenever you come up with maybe what you think is a unique idea, then a couple months later someone else has one just like it. So, but that's always been the case in any kind of art form.
Yes, absolutely. You like zombie movies?
Not really, and yet my first movie, the one I told you about, Cabaret of the Dead, is a zombie movie. So, but it's a zom-com. So.
Really, it's your least favorite of the horror genre?
No, I'd say torture porn is my least favorite.
No.
Zombie movies, I don't know, they just don't really do it for me. I like ghost movies or satanic movies. Those are more my style.
Yeah, George Romero was my guy as far as zombies go.
Oh, he was awesome. I got to interview him a few times, and I even wore his glasses, his famous glasses. He let me try them on.
Oh, my God.
And they were very heavy.
He died just before I was going to meet him at a convention, and then the convention got canceled because of a fire going on.
Oh man, yeah, he was awesome. He was a great guy, and he sure, left behind a great legacy. I mean, he really did create the zombie film as we know it, because when you think back to zombie films before that, they were more Val Lewton style, with the Haiti connection and the voodoo of sort of the living dead person. So I think George Romero certainly irreversibly changed the landscape of zombie films, and that's a great thing.
He sure did. Yeah, I've talked to maybe 15 people from Dawn of the Dead because I love it so much, and various people from his other movies, and I talked to his second wife, Christine, and his third wife, Suzanne. I mean, I've gathered so much information about George Romero because growing up, him and Carpenter were like my two guys as far as horror directors go. I thought they casted the best people, had the best stories, they satirized the government, made them look dumb, which was great.
Yes.
I just love their movies.
Yeah, well, but like you said, there's more going on beneath the surface of a George Romero zombie movie than your typical, sort of. But you know what I love is the with Zombie too. Fulci with the shark attack scene. Have you seen that one?
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
That's wild. Yeah, you got to check that one out.
I'll check it out. So, how long have you been doing your podcast overall now?
Just about a year. I started recording it late last year, and so I've got 3 seasons now of about 12 episodes each, and I concentrate on mixing my 2 favorite things, which is rock music and horror. So people that are either authors in that genre or musicians. One of the most interesting guests I had on was Phil Toussaint, who was bassist for Ozzy Osbourne in the early 80s, and he wrote that song, A Shot in the Dark. So, and of course, Ozzy being sort of a monster movie in and of himself are, one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think that you're a natural at interviewing. Your approach is very respectful and empathetic. I really think you're great at it, Staci.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I think it's because I really love it. I'm not just trying to cash in on a genre.
Oh, I know.
It's my true love, so I think that's why. But thanks. I'm glad that you noticed that.
Yeah, I can tell, who's trying to cash in and who's not. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who's trying to cash in, I do what I do because I want to preserve the memory of classic entertainment, and I just don't have a lot of respect for those clickbait posers, as I call them,
Yeah, right. I wouldn't know how to write a clickbait headline if my life depended on it. I think it got to come from a place of genuine love or respect, and that's how you last in whatever it is you like doing, and trying to also be professional at it.
Yeah, and let's see, Pleasant and somebody else who shall remain nameless, who hurt my feelings, are like the only 2 people you've interviewed that I'm familiar with. But
oh, okay, all right. Well, you'll have to tell me who that was in a DM later on.
Oh yeah, I mean, I cried.
Oh
no. But the guy who wrote "Shot in the Dark," I'm interested. I want to hear that episode. I'll hear that episode because I'm a huge Ozzy fan.
There's a lot of Ozzy stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I talk to horror authors, but like I said, who have sort of a heavy metal or hard rock twist to it, and interviewed June Millington, who was in Fanny, which was one of the first all-female rock bands in the 60s, and talked to Andre Relis and Tracy Guns, who put together a really interesting documentary about Randy Rhoads. So, yeah, and there's quite a great combination of different people on the show.
I have a lot of respect for women in the industry, so I talk to a lot of female pioneers in their fields about different things, I've talked to pioneering female comedy writers. I would love to get, what's her name, on Karen Kay, The Wrecking Crew.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And God, there's people I'm blanking on, but I love to talk to women who are like pioneers in the industries in their different fields, and I love to hear, the different perspectives from them and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because they had a different path to, especially in music, a different path than men did, because it was such a man's world back then, and they were considered a novelty act, but yeah, if you're into that, you should really talk to June Millington from Fanny. She's got a lot of interesting stories and really, really on-the-ball person. And I love talking to people, too, like you said, that are pioneers. And she came up in the 60s and, really paved the way for people like the Runaways or Joan Jett as a solo artist. People like that were highly influenced by Fanny, but not a lot of rock fans have actually heard of the group that kind of set it all into motion.
Oh yeah, I know Charity Ball. Yeah, I've talked to the greatest rock groupie of all time, Pamela Des Barres.
Love her. Yeah, I've got all her books.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I talked to her last year. I'm hoping to talk to her with this new book that just came out. And yeah, she is just awesome. And yeah, do you have any bucket list guests that you'd like to get?
Well, hey, maybe you can put me in touch with Pamela DeBarn.
I can try, but she does have a website with an email. That's how I got in touch with her. And we actually became Facebook friends right away, like a year and a half before we actually did the interview.
Oh, wow, yeah, she's great. I'm working on my next book right now, Rock and Roll Nightmares, True Stories, Volume 2, and there's a chapter about groupies in there, and there's different, the underage groupies. There was Lori Maddox and Sable Starr and people like that who are 14 and 15 years old in the groupie scene in the early 70s, but Pamela was, she was legal. She was over 18, and so she's also in there, but in another chapter. So, yeah, there's so much to explore in the world of rock that it's just, I've learned a lot, too, just in doing the research for my book. I've also done a chapter on the satanic panic of the 80s and how Judas Priest were brought into court in Nevada to answer for the suicides of two young men that were listening to their album, Stained Class. So there's so many interesting things that you can go into in regard to true crime, which is another genre that I love, and melding it with rock music.
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember, comedians making fun of that trial, They said,
that was insane.
Yeah, a couple kids shot themselves after listening to Judas Priest. That means 2 less gas station attendants in this world.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really joke about that these days, can you? I mean, that's another thing, that comedy has become so politically correct now. It's not like it used to be.
That's why I don't do stand-up anymore. One of the reasons. Also, there's no stand-up up here in Reading, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it while it lasted, but I saw the signs of it in hindsight. Like, I started in 2006 in San Francisco, and it was starting to get woke up there in a weird way. Like, I'd be in coffee houses doing my very raunchy stand-up act, and at that time, nobody was standing up and saying, that's horrible, don't say that. Instead, they would just not laugh. They would just sit there looking uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. Well, that's one way to get the message, I guess. But, yeah, I mean, looking back at the rock and roll comedian, in quotes, that would be Sam Kinison, who loved hard rock and raunchy comedy. I mean, I don't know. Would he ever make it today? Probably not.
Sam was my hero from the time I was 2. Like, my memory goes back that far. I remember seeing that first Rodney special, and just he blew me away. Even a 2-year-old boy was loved his stand up.
Something.
Yeah. So a few years ago, you had launched womeninhorror.com. So how did that initially come about?
Well, I was looking to spotlight women in horror, both authors and filmmakers. And I just went into GoDaddy or whatever it was to see what domains were available, and I typed in women in horror, and I'm like, what? That's not taken. So I took it immediately, women in horror, and my initial aim was to spotlight horror films directed by women only, but it's kind of morphed into movies that were also directed by men that have a strong female character, because if it was only horror movies directed by women, I would only have 2 or 3 reviews a year, I'm sorry to say. But, it's really grown quite a bit, and I've also expanded it to some lifestyle segments like, best Halloween costumes or scary drinks to make for Halloween and stuff like that. But it's a lot to take on. So I do have help. Miss Misery, who you know, is one of my best reviewers and very, very diligent, on the ball, and reliable. So it's great to have help for something like that, because it's just kind of like another labor of love.
Yeah, oh, that's so awesome. I love that stuff. You mentioned the book, but is there anything else you're working on?
Well, if it's just the books right now, I'm really concentrating on building this Rock and Roll Nightmares book series, and also the brand around it with the podcast. And we also have a pilot in the early stages of development. So we're looking to turn that into me and my producing partner, Deborah Brock. And so we're looking to get that maybe as a scripted series like Tales from the Crypt kind of flavor to it, but all with hard rock edge.
Nice. So we got to play by Secret Silly game. This is a series of silly, benign slumber party questions.
Okay.
No win or lose. It's just pure fun. And how the game works is, I ask you the question, you answer it, and then you ask me that exact same question, and I answer it. And feel free to comment on the answers because they'll be funny.
Okay.
Okay, Staci, are you ticklish?
No, not really. I'm not. Maybe my feet are ticklish. Are you ticklish?
Oh, yes. If you tickle me without warning, I'll hit you in the groin.
Oh, my God. That doesn't sound fun.
Just out of reflex, yes. What's your favorite part of the body? It could be anything.
In what way?
Anything, it could be a part of your body, a male's body. It could be private, non-private, like...
Let's see. I don't know, since it's not really alive, but hair. I love hairstyles and
that's interesting.
Hair and everything like that to do with hair, so I'd say that.
That's interesting.
Is it? Now, what's your favorite body part?
I think I may have heard one other person say hair once. My favorite part of the body is the belly button.
Okay, and why is that?
When I was 6 years old, I had my first girlfriend. She was the only girl in my first grade class who was nice to me. I was teased by so many girls in my first grade class. It was pretty bad. And she had this adorable little outie belly button that she used to let me play with during class, like when we would be watching like a film strip with the lights turned off,
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we got to junior high, she and I drifted apart, and we went to a different high school, and I tried to get in touch with her like 15 years ago on MySpace, and by that point, she was fucked up on drugs, and she was in a loveless marriage, and lots of bad stuff. And so, like, whenever I see a belly button, I think of her.
Oh, well, that's a very interesting story. Way more interesting than mine, but I'm going to stick with my answer.
Yeah, I'm going to be putting that in my book that I'm currently writing.
Oh, is it a memoir?
It's a memoir. It's about all my crazy celebrity encounters, the last 7 years and beyond that, and just my love of entertainment and like my fights with alcoholism and different things that have happened in my life. And they all have one theme, that is, instant gratification, and how every situation I've ever been in was everything I ever wanted, but for a while, and then something bad happened.
Huh.
I'm a Gemini, so I'm superficial,
Well, okay.
It's really sad. I'm training myself through getting out of my own way, finally. But a lot of the stories are about that.
Writing a memoir could be very cathartic and maybe even educational for yourself and for others.
Exactly. What color are your toenails painted?
They are gold.
Ooh.
Yep. So, Tommy, are your toenails painted, and if so, what color?
Right now they're not painted, but last time they were purple with sparkles.
Aw, that sounds really cute.
Yeah, I like to go elaborate. The last con I went to back in August, they were purple with sparkles.
Well, you definitely make yourself memorable.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your best personality trait?
Reliability. If you ask me to do something, I'm going to do it.
Oh, I got that impression from you.
How about yourself?
I have empathy, and I have no filter.
Okay. Those are two good traits.
Yes. And then my favorite question, is there a stinky smell that just makes you gag?
Yeah, cigarette smoke.
Oh, that is bad.
Yep, and it triggers my migraines too. So.
Oh.
Yeah, that's my least favorite. And what about you?
Either farts or if feet are dirty, I can't stand that.
Yeah, well, hopefully you're not getting that close to dirty feet.
Yeah.
But you never know. On a Frontier or Spirit Airlines flight, it's bound to happen.
Oh my God! I was going through your Instagram, right? You posted some pictures of your feet. Oh my God! Have you ever thought about being a foot model?
No. Did I post it? Oh my God, that must have been a long time ago.
Yeah, they were older ones, like last couple of years. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, wow, those are pretty.
Thank you. I do have small feet. They're only size 5.
Oh wow, I'm a size 16.
Wow. Well, I guess my shoes might fit on your little toe.
Yeah. I'll tell you, my little toe is as big as most women's big toe. I'll tell you.
Wow.
I'm a giant. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3".
Oh, wow. Perfect for a stand-up comedian. A huge target, right?
Yeah. Luckily, I never had anything thrown at me.
Well, that is good.
I have a joke for you. What do you call a boy that doesn't masturbate?
Armless.
A liar.
Okay.
I like that. Armless. I'd never heard that one.
Well, that's my horror background kicking in.
Yeah, everyone guesses the punchline, but armless, that was the first one. So, Stars on Guitars is available on Amazon. Rock and Roll Nightmares podcast is available on most platforms, right?
Right. And the books are on Amazon, so.
And your website, right?
Too.
Yes, and they can go through your website to get a lot of these, right?
Absolutely.
Staci, thank you so much for coming on today, and I will mention you to Pamela when I do get to talk to her next.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. You have yourself a happy holiday season. Be safe out there.
Okay, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. Staci Layne Wilson. Ain't she a sweetheart? Oh my God, she is so much fun. I love talking to her. I wouldn't mind talking to her again. She's so awesome. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.